Get that cripple out of my wedding pictures. Patricia Brooks screamed so loudly that the violin music stopped in the middle of the ballroom. Every head turned at once. Naomi Brooks froze beside the giant white cake, her trembling fingers still holding the bouquet someone had forced into her hands. Xavier sat silently in the wheelchair beside her, wearing an old black suit that looked 2 sizes too big. His shoes were dusty. One sleeve was slightly torn. Guests covered their mouths and laughed anyway. "This is the groom," one woman whispered. "She married a homeless man," another said while lifting a phone to record. Naomi felt heat rising into her face. The crystal chandeliers above her sparkled like a cruel joke. Gold decorations. Diamond necklaces. Champagne towers. Expensive perfume in the air. And beside all that wealth sat a man everyone treated like trash. Patricia stepped closer, her red heels sharp against the marble floor. "Smile, Naomi," she hissed. "You should be grateful. A poor girl like you does not deserve better." Naomi swallowed hard. Her faded white dress had already been stained near the hem from rain outside. The fabric was cheap. Her shoes pinched her swollen feet. She had spent the entire morning crying in the bathroom while makeup artists whispered behind her back. But none of that hurt as much as hearing the guests laugh at Xavier. He kept his eyes lowered. Quiet. Still. Too still. Damien Cole stood near the champagne table with his new rich fiancée hanging on his arm. He smirked openly at Naomi. "You traded me for this?" he said. "That is embarrassing even for you." Naomi shook her head quickly. "You know that is not true." "Then explain why your mother signed the papers," Patricia snapped. "Explain why you needed our money so badly." Silence spread through the room. Naomi's breathing became uneven. She clutched her old purse tighter. Inside it were unpaid hospital bills for her sick mother. Pills she still could not afford. A tiny folded prayer card from church. The last pieces of her old life. "Please," Naomi whispered. "My mother needs surgery." "I did not have a choice." Patricia laughed coldly. "Everyone has a choice." "Not poor people," Xavier suddenly said quietly. The room fell still for one strange second. His voice was calm. Deep. Controlled. Nothing like the broken man everyone expected. Damien scoffed. Look at him pretending to be wise. More laughter exploded around the ballroom. Naomi lowered her eyes again. One bridesmaid leaned toward another. "I heard he lived under a bridge. I heard he begged outside the train station. I heard he cannot even walk." Each whisper stabbed harder than the last. Naomi looked at Xavier carefully for the first time all night. He did not react. Not once. No anger. No shame. Just silence. That silence felt strange. Dangerous somehow. Patricia clapped her hands sharply. "Enough pictures. We are done humiliating ourselves." She turned toward the guards near the doors. "Take them to the servant quarters behind the mansion. They will not stay in the main house." Naomi's eyes widened. "Please do not do this," she begged softly. "My mother thinks I married into a real family. Please. Just for tonight." Patricia stepped close enough for Naomi to smell expensive perfume and cold hatred. "Your mother should have raised a daughter worth respecting." Naomi's lips trembled. Tears rolled down before she could stop them. Several guests laughed louder when they saw her cry. Phones lifted higher. Cameras flashed. Xavier's hand tightened slightly on the wheelchair armrest. Just slightly. A tiny movement almost nobody noticed. Almost. An older gray-haired butler standing near the staircase suddenly stared at Xavier's hand. His face changed for a split second. Shock. Recognition. Fear. Naomi noticed it. So did Xavier. But before anyone could speak, Patricia snapped her fingers again. Move them out now. 2 security guards walked forward immediately. Naomi instinctively bent down beside Xavier. Please be careful with him, she whispered. One guard rolled his eyes. Lady, nobody cares about him. Naomi's face crumpled at those words. I care, she said softly. Xavier slowly turned toward her then. For the first time all night, he actually looked directly into her eyes. Deep brown eyes. Calm. Heavy with something hidden. Something old. Something painful. The music had stopped completely now. Guests watched like they were enjoying theater. Naomi lowered herself slightly beside the wheelchair. I am sorry, she whispered to Xavier. You did not deserve this. Xavier stared at her for another long second. Then his eyes moved toward the giant portrait hanging above the ballroom fireplace. The portrait of the Ellington family. One of the richest families in the city. Naomi noticed something strange immediately. Xavier's face looked strangely similar to the man standing beside the old Ellington patriarch in the photo. Before she could think deeper, Patricia grabbed Naomi's arm hard. Stop staring and move. Naomi stumbled forward. Her purse slipped from her hand. Papers scattered across the marble floor. Hospital bills. Medicine receipts. And one old photograph. A younger Naomi as a child. Standing beside a smiling black man whose face had been partly burned away by time. The old butler suddenly gasped. His hands began shaking. He looked directly at Xavier and accidentally whispered one dangerous word under his breath. Sir, the ballroom went silent. The old butler's face turned pale immediately. Sir, he whispered again, softer this time. Patricia snapped her head toward him so fast that even the guests stopped laughing for a second. What did you say? She demanded sharply. The old man lowered his eyes at once. Nothing, ma'am. Xavier quietly picked up the old photograph from the marble floor before Naomi could reach it. His fingers paused on the burned corner of the picture. Too long. Too carefully. Naomi noticed it immediately. So did Patricia. Give that back, Patricia ordered coldly. Xavier slowly handed the photo to Naomi instead. Their fingers touched for one brief second. Naomi felt strangely embarrassed by how gentle he was. Not weak. Gentle. That frightened her more. The guards finally pushed them toward the back hallway of the mansion. The bright ballroom disappeared behind them. The laughter still echoed through the walls. Crystal chandeliers faded into dim yellow servant lights. Marble floors became cracked tiles. Gold paintings became peeling wallpaper. The contrast hurt Naomi more than the insults. Upstairs, rich guests danced beside champagne towers. Downstairs, she walked beside a man everyone treated like garbage. This is where trash belongs, Patricia said while opening a narrow door behind the mansion kitchen. The room inside was tiny. One bed. One broken lamp. Old curtains stained by water damage. Naomi looked down silently. Xavier remained calm in the wheelchair. Too calm again. Patricia crossed her arms. You wanted marriage. There it is. Naomi finally looked up. I never wanted this. Poor girls always say that after the money arrives, Patricia replied. Naomi's eyes filled instantly. My mother is sick. That is not my problem. Please, Naomi whispered. At least let me visit her tomorrow. Patricia stared at her for a long moment before smiling coldly. That depends on how obedient you are. Then she walked away in her expensive heels while 2 guards laughed quietly behind her. The metal door slammed shut. Silence filled the room. Naomi slowly sat on the edge of the bed. Her wedding dress wrinkled beneath her trembling hands. Xavier remained near the doorway, his face unreadable. Rain tapped softly against the small window. Somewhere far above them, music from the ballroom still played. Naomi finally broke down crying. Not loudly. Quietly. Exhausted crying. The kind that comes after too much humiliation. "I am sorry," she whispered without looking at him. "You did not deserve tonight either." Xavier watched her carefully. "You apologized to me in front of everyone," he said softly. "Nobody else did." Naomi wiped her face quickly. "That does not change anything." "Maybe not yet." The words made her look at him again. For one strange second, he did not sound homeless. He sounded educated. Controlled. Powerful even. Naomi quickly looked away. Her phone suddenly buzzed in her old purse. She answered immediately. "Mama?" A weak coughing voice came through the speaker. "Naomi, did the wedding happen?" Naomi closed her eyes hard. "Yes, Mama." "Is your husband kind?" Naomi looked toward Xavier again. He quietly turned his face away to give her privacy. That small gesture almost broke her heart. I do not know yet," she whispered. Her mother coughed painfully again. "The hospital called today. We need more money." Naomi lowered her head immediately. More tears fell onto her dress. Xavier listened silently from across the room. "I will find a way," Naomi promised weakly. "I always do." After the call ended, the room became quiet again. Xavier slowly noticed the stack of unpaid hospital bills sticking from Naomi's purse. One paper slipped loose onto the floor. He picked it up carefully. Naomi immediately stood up in panic. "Do not touch that." Xavier looked at the bill only briefly before handing it back. "Your mother needs surgery soon." Naomi froze. "How did you know that?" Xavier glanced toward the hospital logo. "It says it there." But something in his eyes said he noticed more than that. A strange silence filled the room again. Then Naomi noticed his left hand resting beside the wheelchair arm. There was a faint scar near his wrist. And beside it, a dark birthmark shaped almost like a crescent moon. Her eyes widened slightly. The exact same mark appeared on the old man in her childhood photograph. Before she could speak, voices suddenly echoed outside the servant hallway. "Patricia again. Angry this time. Find out why that old butler called him sir," she hissed. Naomi's breathing stopped. Xavier's expression changed for the first time all night. Not fear. Warning. Then his phone vibrated quietly inside his coat pocket. Naomi stared in shock as Xavier answered in a cold, controlled voice completely different from before. "Talk," he said. Silence. Then Naomi heard a man's nervous voice through the speaker. "Mr. Ellington, we found the original files." Xavier slowly lifted his eyes toward the door. And Naomi suddenly realized this marriage might not be what anyone thought it was. Naomi's breathing stopped completely. Xavier slowly lowered the phone from his ear. The tiny servant room suddenly felt too small for the truth pressing against the walls. "Mr. Ellington?" Naomi whispered weakly. Xavier looked at her for a long second before answering. "You should get some sleep." That frightened her even more. Men with nothing did not speak like that. Men abandoned by society did not receive nervous late-night calls about secret files. Outside the servant window, rain continued falling over the mansion gardens. Somewhere upstairs, wealthy guests still laughed beneath crystal lights. But inside this tiny room, Naomi felt the entire night shifting beneath her feet. Xavier pressed another button on the phone. "Find the original hospital records," he said quietly. "And the marriage documents from 20 years ago." Naomi stared at him. "Why are you investigating my family?" Xavier paused. His eyes moved slowly toward the old photograph still resting beside Naomi's torn purse. Because somebody lied. Silence filled the room again. Naomi quickly grabbed the picture and slipped it back inside her bag like she was hiding a wound. Xavier noticed the movement immediately. But he did not force her to explain. He simply watched. Calm. Careful. Dangerous in a quiet way. Early the next morning, Naomi left the mansion before most guests woke up. Her old shoes splashed through muddy streets while expensive cars still lined the mansion driveway behind her. She held her thin jacket tightly against the cold wind. Her wedding dress was hidden beneath it now, folded badly inside a torn plastic bag. Every step felt heavier than the last. She arrived at the small hospital near the South Side Market just after sunrise. The smell of medicine and old paint filled the narrow hallway. Nurses rushed past with tired faces. Broken ceiling lights flickered softly overhead. Naomi stopped outside room 12 and took a deep breath before entering. Her mother, Evelyn, looked weaker than yesterday. The oxygen machine beside the bed rattled unevenly. Naomi forced herself to smile. "Good morning, Mama." Evelyn tried to smile back but began coughing hard instead. Naomi immediately held her shoulders gently. "The doctor came earlier," Evelyn whispered after catching her breath. "They need payment by tomorrow." Naomi lowered her eyes silently. Her phone screen lit up with 3 unpaid bill reminders at once. Rent. Hospital fees. Loan notice. Her hands shook. "I will fix it," she whispered again. "You always say that," Evelyn replied softly. There was no anger in her voice. That hurt Naomi more. Across town, inside a black glass office tower, Xavier sat silently while his assistant placed old documents across a massive wooden desk. Rain still rolled down the skyscraper windows. The records were hidden intentionally, the assistant said carefully. Somebody paid to seal them years ago. Xavier opened one thin file slowly. Inside was an old marriage certificate. Another paper rested underneath it. A hospital birth report with part of the name burned away. Xavier's jaw tightened slightly. Then his eyes stopped on one detail. Crescent-shaped birthmark. His fingers slowly froze on the page. Back at the hospital, Naomi counted crumpled cash beside a vending machine. Not enough. Never enough. A small boy nearby watched her quietly while holding an empty juice box. Naomi noticed immediately and handed him the last sandwich from her bag without hesitation. "But what about you?" the boy asked softly. Naomi smiled weakly. "I will survive." A nurse approached her moments later. "Miss Brooks?" Naomi stood quickly. "Yes. Your mother's medication has been reduced until payment arrives." Naomi's face fell instantly. "Please, she needs those treatments." "I am sorry." Naomi pressed trembling hands against her face as the nurse walked away. She cried silently beside the hospital wall while people passed without stopping. Then her phone vibrated unexpectedly. Unknown number. Naomi answered carefully. "Hello." Xavier's voice came through calmly. "Do not leave the hospital today." Naomi froze. "How did you know where I was?" Silence. Then Xavier asked softly, "Did your mother ever mention the name Eleanor Ellington?" Naomi's entire body went cold. Inside her mother's room, something suddenly crashed onto the floor. Naomi rushed inside in panic. Evelyn was gripping an old wooden box with shaking hands. The lid had fallen open beside the bed. Inside was a faded necklace, and another photograph Naomi had never seen before. A younger Evelyn stood beside a wealthy black woman outside the Ellington mansion gates. And in the corner of the picture, a man standing beside them looked exactly like Xavier. Naomi's fingers trembled around the old photograph. The hospital room suddenly felt colder. Her mother looked terrified. "Mama," Naomi whispered carefully. "Who is that man?" Evelyn's breathing became uneven again. She reached weakly for the necklace inside the wooden box. The small silver pendant shook in her fragile hand. "Hide it," she whispered urgently. "Before they find out." Naomi frowned in confusion. "Who?" But Evelyn looked toward the hospital door instead of answering. Fear filled her tired eyes. Across the city, Xavier sat silently inside the back seat of a black luxury car while rain rolled across the tinted windows. The photograph Naomi sent him through his assistant glowed faintly on his phone screen. His jaw tightened slowly. The woman beside Evelyn in the picture was his late mother, Eleanor Ellington. There was no mistake. Same necklace. Same mansion gate behind them. Same date written in faded ink at the bottom corner. 1998, Xavier looked toward his assistant sitting across from him. "Find every employee record connected to my mother." "Yes, sir. Especially anyone named Evelyn Brooks." The assistant hesitated. "Your Aunt Lorraine already called twice. She knows you reopened the archive files." Xavier's eyes darkened slightly. "That means she is nervous." Inside the Ellington mansion, Lorraine Ellington stood near the dining hall window with a wine glass frozen in her hand. Her perfectly calm face cracked for 1 second after ending a phone call. "She still has the necklace," she whispered sharply. A man beside her lowered his voice. "We tried finding it years ago." Lorraine looked toward the grand staircase where wedding decorations still hung from the previous night. "Then find it now." Back at the hospital, Naomi sat beside her mother's bed while holding unpaid bills in one hand and the photograph in the other. Nothing made sense anymore. Why would her mother know the Ellington family? Why did Xavier react like that? And why did her mother look so afraid? A nurse entered quietly. "Miss Brooks, someone paid half of your mother's treatment this morning." Naomi looked up immediately. "Who?" The payment came anonymously. Naomi lowered her eyes slowly. Tiny hope touched her face for the first time in days. Then her cracked phone buzzed again. "Xavier." She answered carefully. "Hello." "Do not leave the hospital alone tonight," Xavier said calmly. Naomi immediately stiffened. "Why are you helping me?" Silence. Then Xavier asked quietly, "Did your mother ever work inside the Ellington mansion?" Naomi looked toward Evelyn. Her mother turned her face away weakly. I do not know everything," Naomi admitted softly. Xavier closed his eyes for 1 second like that answer confirmed something painful. "I am coming there now." Before Naomi could reply, the call ended. 2 floors below, Lorraine's driver stepped out of a dark sedan outside the hospital entrance. He carried a sealed envelope. Upstairs, Evelyn suddenly grabbed Naomi's wrist tightly. "Listen to me," she whispered through tears. "If they offer money, do not trust them." Naomi's heart pounded harder. "Who are they?" Evelyn opened her mouth to answer. But coughing stopped her completely. Meanwhile Xavier entered a private archive room inside the Ellington corporate office. Dust-covered old employee files stacked high against metal shelves. His assistant opened one folder carefully. "Evelyn Brooks," he read quietly. Xavier stepped closer immediately. Inside the file was an employment contract from 26 years ago. Beneath it rested another document with part of the name torn away. Xavier slowly unfolded the damaged page. His eyes stopped instantly. Marriage arrangement agreement. Signed by Eleanor Ellington. And below that, another line partly burned at the edge. Child transfer authorization. Xavier's expression hardened. "Who removed the second page?" The assistant swallowed nervously. "There is more, sir." He handed Xavier an old security photograph taken outside the mansion gates years earlier. A young Evelyn stood crying beside a suitcase. Next to her was a little black girl holding the exact same silver necklace Naomi carried now. Xavier stared silently at the child's face. Same eyes. Same birthmark near the collarbone. His breathing slowed dangerously. Back at the hospital, Naomi stepped into the hallway after hearing raised voices downstairs. She froze immediately. Lorraine Ellington stood near the elevator in an elegant white coat surrounded by 2 guards. Rich. Calm. Untouchable. Lorraine slowly looked Naomi up and down like she was inspecting dirt. Then her eyes dropped to the necklace hidden poorly beneath Naomi's sweater. Silence fell instantly between them. Lorraine smiled coldly. So, she whispered softly, you are the girl who survived. Lorraine Ellington's cold smile did not move at all. Hospital visitors passed behind her quietly, but the hallway suddenly felt frozen around Naomi. You are the girl who survived, Lorraine repeated softly. Naomi instinctively stepped backward toward her mother's room. I do not know what you mean. Lorraine laughed under her breath. Your mother taught you that answer very well. One of the guards slowly closed the hallway door behind Naomi. Pressure filled the silence immediately. Naomi gripped the necklace beneath her sweater harder. Lorraine noticed everything. That necklace does not belong to poor girls, she said sharply. Give it to me. Naomi shook her head instantly. No, Lorraine's expression darkened. You think that piece of metal will save you? Before Naomi could answer, Xavier stepped out of the elevator at the far end of the hallway. His black coat was still wet from the rain outside. The guards immediately straightened. Lorraine's face changed for half a second. Xavier walked forward calmly, his eyes never leaving Lorraine. Why are you here? He asked quietly. Lorraine folded her arms. I came to help this confused girl understand her place. Naomi lowered her eyes in shame as nurses nearby began whispering. A doctor paused beside the front desk. 2 visitors lifted their phones slightly, pretending not to stare. Lorraine noticed the attention and raised her voice intentionally. This girl is trying to manipulate the Ellington family using fake stories and stolen jewelry. Naomi's face went pale instantly. That is not true. Then explain why you are carrying my mother's necklace, Lorraine snapped. Silence hit the hallway hard. Even Xavier looked toward Naomi carefully now. Naomi's lips trembled. My mother gave it to me. Lorraine stepped closer. Your mother was a servant. Each word landed like a slap. Servants do not inherit family heirlooms. Naomi tried to speak again, but Lorraine cut her off immediately. Or maybe this is another trick to steal money from rich people. More eyes turned toward Naomi now. Whispering spread through the hallway. Naomi felt herself shrinking under it. I never asked for money, she whispered weakly. Lorraine laughed coldly. That is what liars always say. Xavier's voice cut through the tension quietly. Enough. Lorraine looked at him sharply. You are defending her already? Xavier stayed calm. I am asking questions. Questions destroy families, Lorraine replied softly. You should remember that. Inside the hospital room, Evelyn suddenly began coughing violently again. Naomi rushed toward the door immediately, but one of Lorraine's guards stepped partly into her path by mistake. The movement made the hallway even more humiliating. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. Please, my mother needs me. Xavier's expression hardened slightly. Move. The guard stepped away instantly. Naomi hurried inside the room while people continued staring through the doorway. Her humiliation felt worse than the wedding. At least there, strangers judged her. Here, sick people and nurses looked at her like she was dangerous. Inside the room, Evelyn grabbed Naomi's hand weakly. Did she see the necklace? Naomi nodded silently. Evelyn closed her eyes in fear. Across the hallway, Xavier quietly questioned the doctor. Who paid half the treatment bill? The doctor hesitated. Anonymous transfer. From where? An Ellington corporate account. Xavier slowly turned toward Lorraine. For the first time, her perfect calm cracked slightly. Tiny hope flickered inside Xavier's eyes. Something was wrong. Very wrong. A few minutes later, Naomi stepped back into the hallway carrying her torn bag and old jacket. Lorraine immediately held out a folded document. Sign this. Naomi frowned. What is it? A statement saying your mother stole that necklace years ago. Naomi froze completely. That is a lie. Lorraine lowered her voice dangerously. Sign it, or your mother loses her hospital room tonight. Naomi's hands began shaking violently. The hallway fell silent again. Xavier stared at Lorraine in disbelief. You would threaten a dying woman? Lorraine turned cold eyes toward him. I protect this family. Naomi looked around desperately. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. Even the nurses looked afraid now. Slowly, painfully, Naomi reached for the pen. Then a small voice suddenly echoed from the waiting area nearby. That lady is lying. Everyone turned instantly. The little boy Naomi fed earlier stood clutching an old hospital tablet against his chest. I saw the security video, he whispered nervously. Lorraine's face lost color for the first time. Xavier stepped forward immediately. What video? The boy held up the tablet with trembling hands. On the frozen screen was old hospital footage from years ago. A younger Lorraine Ellington stood beside Evelyn Brooks, holding the exact same necklace before secretly placing it into Evelyn's hands. The little boy's hands shook as he held the hospital tablet tighter against his chest. The frozen image on the screen made the entire hallway silent. A younger Lorraine Ellington stood beside Evelyn Brooks 20 years earlier, secretly placing the silver necklace into Evelyn's hands. Naomi stopped breathing for a second. Xavier slowly stepped closer to the screen. Play the video, he said quietly. Lorraine reacted instantly. That footage is fake. Nobody edited this, the boy whispered nervously. Xavier crouched slightly to the child's eye level. Where did you find it? Storage room downstairs, the boy answered. The old cameras save everything. Lorraine's voice hardened immediately. Give me that tablet. The boy stepped backward in fear. Naomi moved protectively in front of him without thinking. Her old shoes scraped softly against the hospital floor. Do not touch him, she whispered. Xavier looked at Naomi carefully after hearing those words. Something in her voice reminded him of someone he had not thought about in years. The tablet finally began playing. Grainy hospital footage flickered across the screen. Young Evelyn sat weakly in a wheelchair beside a hospital bed. Lorraine looked younger too, elegant even then, but nervous. The camera had no sound, but her actions were clear. She placed the necklace into Evelyn's hands. Then she pointed toward a sleeping baby wrapped in a blanket nearby. Naomi's entire body froze. That baby, she whispered. Xavier stared at the screen harder now. The footage suddenly glitched. Then one final frame appeared before the video stopped completely. A hospital file. One name visible for less than a second. Naomi Grace Brooks. Silence crushed the hallway. Even the nurses stopped moving. Lorraine's face lost all color. That proves nothing, she snapped quickly. Xavier did not answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on Naomi. Your full name is Naomi Grace Brooks. Naomi nodded slowly, confused and frightened. Yes. Lorraine interrupted sharply. Many people have that name. But Xavier was already thinking deeper now. His fingers tightened slightly around the silver necklace Naomi still held. He recognized the family engraving on the back. An engraving only one branch of the Ellington family carried. Tiny Hope entered the hallway for the first time. Not safety. Not justice. But possibility. Naomi looked overwhelmed and embarrassed under everyone's eyes. I do not understand any of this, she whispered. Xavier's voice softened slightly. Neither do I yet. One older nurse suddenly stepped forward hesitantly. I remember that night, she said quietly. Lorraine turned toward her immediately. Fear flashed behind her eyes. Be careful what you say. The nurse swallowed hard. There was an accident in the maternity wing. Files disappeared afterward. Xavier looked sharply at Lorraine. Who ordered the records removed? Lorraine folded her arms defensively. You are turning hospital gossip into fantasy. The nurse lowered her voice even more. One baby was transferred secretly. Naomi's eyes filled with tears instantly. What baby? Nobody answered right away. If you are listening right now, comment what you think Lorraine is truly hiding, and why Naomi's name appeared in that old hospital footage after all these years. The silence after the video felt heavier than before. But then the obstacle came immediately. The screen suddenly went black. Corrupted file, one hospital technician announced nervously after arriving. Half the footage is missing. Lorraine recovered quickly. Too quickly. Exactly, she said coldly. A broken video means nothing. Some people in the hallway started whispering again. Doubt slowly returned to the crowd. Naomi lowered her head in shame once more. Xavier noticed it instantly. Do not look down, he told her quietly. Lorraine heard that too. Her jaw tightened. She realized Xavier was no longer dismissing Naomi completely. That frightened her more than the footage itself. Suddenly Xavier's phone rang. His assistant's voice came through urgently. Sir, we found something strange in the archived Ellington Hospital accounts. Xavier stepped away slightly. What? Payments were made to Evelyn Brooks for years. Secretly. Xavier looked back toward Lorraine. Authorized under your mother's foundation. Lorraine's breathing changed for one brief second. Tiny. Barely visible. But Xavier noticed. Naomi noticed too. Another clue. Another lie cracking open. Then the little boy tugged gently on Naomi's sleeve. There is more, he whispered. From inside his jacket pocket, he pulled out a folded paper damaged by age and water. A hospital transfer form. Half the ink was gone. But one line remained visible. Child transferred under Ellington family request. Naomi's hands began trembling violently. Xavier carefully took the paper. Then his expression changed completely. At the bottom corner of the form was a second signature. Not Lorraine's. His father's. Xavier's fingers tightened around the old transfer form. His father's signature stared back at him under the cold hospital light. Naomi stood frozen beside him, breathing unevenly, her faded wedding dress still stained from the rain outside. Lorraine slowly stepped backward when she realized Xavier had seen the signature clearly. That document means nothing, she said quickly. Xavier finally looked at her directly. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. Then why are you shaking? Silence swallowed the hallway. Naomi lowered her eyes immediately. She was used to people yelling at her, mocking her, pushing her away. But this silence felt different. For the first time, somebody powerful was not looking at her with disgust. Xavier folded the document carefully instead of handing it over. That small action made Lorraine panic more than words ever could. Give me that paper, she snapped. Xavier ignored her completely. Then he looked at Naomi again. Your mother is still upstairs. Naomi nodded slowly. Room 214. Her voice cracked from exhaustion. Xavier noticed her trembling hands immediately. He gently removed his coat and placed it over her shoulders. The movement was simple. Quiet. But Naomi looked shocked by the kindness. "You do not have to do that," she whispered. "You are cold," Xavier replied softly. Lorraine laughed bitterly. "A poor stranger cries for 1 hour and suddenly you trust her." Xavier's expression darkened slightly. "I trust evidence." The little boy who found the tablet stepped closer nervously. "Miss Naomi was crying before anybody came," he said quietly. "She did not know about the video." Xavier glanced down at the boy. "Thank you." Naomi looked away quickly to hide her tears. Nobody had defended her in a very long time. Xavier motioned toward hospital security standing nearby. "No one touches her. No one questions her without me present." Lorraine's jaw tightened instantly. "You are embarrassing this family over a cripple and a poor girl from nowhere." Naomi flinched after hearing the word cripple again. Xavier noticed immediately. "His name is Elijah Brooks," Naomi whispered carefully. "He is still my husband." Xavier paused after hearing that. Something moved behind his calm expression. Respect. Naomi had every reason to run from Elijah after the humiliation she suffered. But she still protected his dignity. That mattered to Xavier more than she realized. He asked quietly, "Where is he now?" Naomi hesitated. "Rehabilitation wing downstairs. They moved him after the wedding." Xavier looked disturbed by that answer. Rich guests still wandered through the luxury hospital lobby downstairs laughing about the wedding disaster while Elijah lay hidden alone in another wing. The contrast made the entire place feel colder. Tiny hope appeared again when Xavier pulled a black card from his wallet and handed it to the nurse station. "Transfer all unpaid bills connected to Naomi Brooks and Elijah Brooks to my office temporarily." Naomi stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you help us?" Xavier answered slowly. "Because somebody worked very hard to make sure your life stayed buried." Lorraine interrupted instantly. "She is manipulating you." But Xavier no longer sounded uncertain. "Maybe. Or maybe somebody manipulated all of us." The hallway became silent again. Even Lorraine understood she was losing control slowly. Then another emotional crack appeared unexpectedly. Naomi's sick mother weakly called from inside the room. "Naomi!" Naomi rushed inside immediately. Xavier followed halfway before stopping respectfully at the doorway. The room was tiny and dim compared to the luxury suites upstairs. Peeling paint. Broken blinds. Cheap medicine bottles beside the bed. Naomi carefully held her mother's hand. "I am here." Her mother opened her weak eyes slowly. Then she saw Xavier standing near the door. Fear crossed her face instantly. "No," she whispered painfully. "They found us again." Xavier stepped closer carefully. "Who found you?" The older woman stared directly at the silver necklace still hanging from Naomi's hand. Tears rolled slowly down her face. Evelyn tried to protect the child. Lorraine suddenly appeared outside the room. "Enough," she snapped sharply. Naomi turned immediately. "Why are you afraid of her talking?" Lorraine forced a smile toward Xavier. "She is sick. She does not know what she is saying." But Xavier noticed something else now. Naomi instinctively moved protectively in front of her mother the exact same way Evelyn had done in the old hospital footage years ago. Same posture. Same eyes. Same fear. The memory hit him hard. Then Naomi quietly whispered words that made Xavier completely still. "My mother always told me, if the Ellington family ever found the necklace again, everything would finally come back." Xavier slowly looked at the necklace in his hand. And for the first time in years, he remembered hearing those exact words as a child. Xavier's hand slowly tightened around the necklace as Naomi's words echoed through the hospital room. The silver pendant suddenly felt heavier than metal. His breathing slowed. Controlled on the outside. Shaken underneath. Naomi's sick mother looked terrified after speaking. I told Evelyn to run, she whispered weakly. I told her the Ellington family would destroy that child if they found out. Naomi stared at her mother in confusion. What child? Lorraine stepped forward instantly. She is confused again. But Xavier raised one hand sharply. Silence filled the room. Even Lorraine stopped talking. Xavier's eyes never left Naomi's mother. Who is Evelyn? The older woman's lips trembled. Your father promised to protect her. Xavier froze slightly after hearing that. Naomi looked between them helplessly. Nothing made sense anymore. Her cheap wedding dress still clung damply to her body while billionaire family secrets suddenly circled around her life like shadows. Xavier carefully pulled an old folded photograph from inside the transfer file. The edges were damaged with age. He placed it gently on the hospital bed. Naomi leaned closer slowly. Her breath caught immediately. The woman in the photo looked almost identical to her mother 20 years younger. Beside her stood a young black woman holding a newborn baby wrapped in a blanket. But half the photo had been cut away violently. Someone had removed another person from the picture. Who cut this? Xavier asked quietly. Naomi's mother closed her eyes in pain. The night Evelyn disappeared. Lorraine suddenly laughed nervously. Old photos do not prove anything. Xavier looked at her calmly. Then why do you keep interrupting? Lorraine's face hardened instantly. Naomi carefully touched the corner of the photo. A small stitched symbol appeared on the baby blanket. The exact same symbol was engraved inside the necklace. Xavier noticed immediately. So did Lorraine. And for the first time, fear truly entered Lorraine's eyes. That necklace belonged to the Ellington bloodline, she said too quickly. The room went silent again. Naomi slowly looked up. Then why did my mother hide it from me my whole life? Nobody answered immediately. Down the hallway, rain tapped softly against the hospital windows while rich guests from the ruined wedding still whispered downstairs. Luxury. Power. Fear. Lies. Everything collided inside one tiny hospital room. Xavier stepped toward Naomi's mother carefully. Tell me what happened that night. The older woman struggled to breathe. Your father was supposed to marry Lorraine's sister. But he loved Evelyn instead. Naomi's eyes widened. Lorraine snapped instantly. Stop talking. But the woman continued weakly through tears. Evelyn had a baby. Somebody inside the mansion wanted the child gone before the family discovered the truth. Xavier's jaw tightened slowly. Naomi looked completely overwhelmed now. My mother knew the Ellington family, she whispered. Xavier looked down at the old photo again. His voice lowered. More than that. Tiny hope entered the room for the first time. Naomi was not crazy. Her life had not been random suffering. Something bigger had always followed her. Xavier quietly turned toward his assistant Marcus, who had just arrived carrying another file box. Check every sealed family record from 25 years ago. Especially anything connected to Evelyn Carter. Marcus nodded immediately. Lorraine's expression darkened. Those records were destroyed. Xavier looked directly at her. Destroyed records leave fingerprints too. Naomi's mother suddenly grabbed Naomi's wrist weakly. Listen to me, she whispered urgently. Your real name was never Naomi Brooks. Naomi stood completely still. Even Xavier stopped breathing for 1 second. What? Naomi whispered. Before her mother could answer, the heart monitor suddenly beeped harder. Nurses rushed inside immediately. Doctors asked everyone to step back. Naomi stumbled backward in panic. Xavier caught her arm before she fell. She looked up at him with tears filling her eyes. Why is this happening to me? Xavier answered honestly for the first time. Because somebody buried the truth too deep. Then another emotional crack hit the room. Marcus slowly opened one recovered file from the archive box. Inside was a hospital birth certificate missing half its pages. But one detail remained visible clearly under the light. Mother, Evelyn Carter. Child, female. Family status request filed directly by Ellington Holdings. Xavier's face changed completely. Lorraine quietly stepped backward toward the door. She understood the past was opening faster now. But before anyone could stop her, Naomi's mother whispered one final sentence through trembling lips. The woman who stole your life, still lives inside the mansion. The hospital room fell silent after Naomi's mother whispered the final sentence. The woman who stole your life still lives inside the mansion. Lorraine immediately stepped backward toward the door. Fear flashed across her face for only 1 second before her cold expression returned. Xavier noticed it. So did Naomi. But before anyone could speak again, Lorraine pulled out her phone quietly and sent a message to someone outside the hospital. Xavier saw the movement. He said nothing. Yet. Naomi looked completely lost now. What does that mean? She asked weakly. What life? Her mother tried to speak again, but nurses suddenly pushed everyone back as her breathing worsened. Please wait outside, a doctor ordered firmly. Naomi stumbled into the hallway in tears. Xavier remained beside her while Marcus carefully carried the recovered files. Lorraine watched them from across the corridor with growing panic hidden behind fake calm. Then her trap began. 1 hour later, Naomi received a sudden message from hospital administration requesting her presence downstairs immediately. Xavier was gone briefly meeting attorneys connected to the Ellington estate records. Marcus stayed behind checking the damaged birth documents. Naomi walked nervously into the grand hospital conference hall downstairs. The room instantly turned cold. Rich guests from the failed wedding sat around long glass tables whispering. Security guards stood near the exits. Cameras from gossip bloggers pointed directly toward her face. Lorraine stood at the center calmly dressed in white silk. Perfect. Controlled. Dangerous. Elijah sat silently in his wheelchair near the back corner looking pale and exhausted. Naomi's heart broke seeing him there. Lorraine slowly lifted a sealed envelope. Naomi Brooks, she announced loudly. Before this scandal destroys more lives, you should tell everyone why stolen hospital files were found in your room. Naomi froze completely. What? Gasps filled the room. Lorraine opened the envelope dramatically. Inside were copies of the birth records Marcus had been reviewing upstairs. Naomi stepped backward immediately. I did not take those. Lorraine laughed softly. Then how did your fingerprints appear on them? The crowd instantly turned colder. Phones lifted higher. Rich women whispered behind diamond-covered hands. Naomi looked desperately around the room. Somebody is lying. Lorraine's voice sharpened. You lied your way into this family from the beginning. Elijah suddenly looked up painfully. Naomi would never steal. Lorraine snapped toward him. You barely know your own wife. Silence crushed the room again. Naomi looked humiliated all over again. Worse than before. This time even Elijah looked uncertain for one painful second after seeing the files. Naomi noticed it immediately. That hurt more than the accusations themselves. Please believe me, she whispered. Nobody answered. Tiny hope appeared briefly when Marcus suddenly entered the room carrying another archive box. He looked confused after seeing the scene. These documents were locked upstairs, he said carefully. Lorraine interrupted instantly. Exactly. Which means somebody took them. Then she pointed directly at Naomi. Security footage shows her leaving the archive floor. Naomi's breathing became uneven. I went upstairs looking for my mother's medicine. Lorraine smiled coldly. Convenient. A large screen behind the conference table suddenly displayed grainy hallway footage. Naomi appeared briefly near the archive hallway exactly as Lorraine claimed. The crowd erupted immediately. She planned everything. Gold digger. She trapped that disabled man. Naomi's eyes filled with tears again. Social pressure swallowed her whole. Even hospital staff looked uncomfortable now. Elijah gripped his wheelchair tightly. Naomi, but Lorraine continued mercilessly. She wanted the Ellington fortune. Naomi shook her head desperately. I did not even know who the Ellingtons were. Lorraine stepped closer slowly. Then why does your mother know our secrets? Naomi could not answer. Not because she lied. Because she truly did not know. That confusion made her look guiltier. Xavier still had not returned. And Lorraine knew it. That was the trap. Marcus quietly leaned toward the screen while everyone argued. Something bothered him. The hallway timestamp flickered strangely. Tiny hope appeared again. Very small. This footage was edited, Marcus said carefully. Lorraine turned instantly. Excuse me. Marcus pointed toward the screen. The security clock jumps forward 7 minutes. The room quieted slightly. Naomi looked up immediately. But before Marcus could continue, one of Lorraine's lawyers interrupted loudly. That proves nothing. The crowd shifted again. Suspicion returned toward Naomi immediately. Lorraine regained control fast. Enough, she announced dramatically. This woman has brought shame to this family and this hospital. Then she turned toward security. Escort her out. Naomi's face collapsed completely. Elijah tried to move forward in his wheelchair, but 2 relatives stopped him gently. Nobody wanted scandal touching the Ellington name further. Naomi looked around the room one last time. Nobody defended her. Nobody except Marcus, who still stared uneasily at the frozen video frame. Then another emotional crack appeared suddenly. A small child's voice echoed near the doorway. That is not the full video. Every head turned instantly. The little boy from earlier stood there shaking nervously with a flash drive hidden in his small hand. Behind him, the massive conference doors slowly opened. Xavier stepped inside wearing a dark coat, his expression calm and unreadable. And in his hand, was the original security footage. The massive conference room doors closed slowly behind Xavier Ellington. Silence spread across the hospital board hall like cold smoke. Every rich guest turned toward him immediately. Naomi stood frozen near the center of the room, her eyes swollen from humiliation. The little boy beside the doorway clutched the flash drive tightly with trembling fingers. Lorraine's confident smile faded for the first time that night. Xavier walked forward calmly. Slow. Controlled. Dangerous without raising his voice. Marcus followed behind carrying the damaged archive box. Elijah remained silent in his wheelchair, staring at Naomi like he no longer knew what truth meant anymore. The giant screen behind the conference table glowed faintly blue, waiting. Xavier stopped beside Naomi. He looked at the security guards blocking her path. Move. Just one word. The guards stepped aside instantly. Naomi lowered her eyes, overwhelmed by the sudden protection. Lorraine quickly recovered her composure. Xavier, this woman manipulated everyone. Xavier did not even look at her. His eyes stayed on the flash drive in the child's hand. Who gave you that? He asked softly. The boy swallowed hard. A nurse told me to hide it. Murmurs exploded across the room. Lorraine immediately stepped forward. This is absurd. Marcus calmly placed several files onto the long glass table. The archived timestamps were altered, he announced quietly. Someone edited the footage. Lorraine's jaw tightened slightly. Tiny cracks. Tiny fear. Naomi stood completely still, barely breathing now. She looked exhausted. Broken almost. But she still held herself with dignity even while the crowd stared at her like a criminal. One wealthy woman whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "Poor girls always bring trouble." Naomi heard it. Her hands trembled harder. Xavier noticed. His voice remained calm. "Nobody speaks until all evidence is reviewed." The room fell silent again. Emotional pressure filled every corner. Phones slowly lowered. Even the gossip bloggers stopped talking. Then Elijah finally spoke weakly from across the room. "Naomi, tell me the truth." Naomi looked at him with tears gathering again. "I already did." That sentence hurt the room more than shouting would have. Lorraine suddenly laughed softly. "Truth?" She pointed toward Naomi. She appeared from nowhere. Married into this family overnight. Now secret files appear everywhere she goes. She turned toward the crowd dramatically. "How much more proof do you people need?" Some guests nodded nervously. Others avoided eye contact. Nobody wanted to stand against the Ellington family publicly. Xavier slowly reached into his coat pocket and removed an old silver necklace wrapped carefully in cloth. The moment Naomi saw it, her face lost all color. Her breathing stopped. Lorraine noticed immediately. Fear flashed across her eyes again. Xavier placed the necklace onto the table beside the hospital records. "Interesting," he said quietly. "This was found hidden inside Naomi's mother's belongings." Lorraine interrupted fast. "Many people own jewelry like that." Marcus opened one of the damaged files carefully. Not with the Ellington family crest engraved inside. The entire room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even Elijah stared at the necklace now. Naomi whispered weakly, "My mother told me never to lose it." Xavier looked at her carefully. Too carefully. Like he was searching through years of buried memory. Around 60% into the chaos, the narrator's tension naturally pulled viewers deeper. If you were standing inside that room, who would you believe right now? Naomi, or the woman trying so hard to silence her? Comment below who deserves justice before the truth finally comes out. Lorraine suddenly snapped. Enough of this circus. She turned toward the hospital director. "Turn that screen off immediately." Xavier's cold voice cut through the room before anyone moved. "Nobody touches that screen." Public silence crashed down again. Tiny hope appeared when the little boy slowly stepped closer to Naomi. "I saw the lady delete part of the video," he whispered nervously. Several guests gasped. Lorraine turned pale for half a second before forcing another smile. Children imagine things. But now people were starting to doubt her. The atmosphere had changed. Slowly. Dangerously. Marcus inserted the flash drive into the system. The screen flickered once. Twice. Naomi instinctively stepped backward, terrified of what everyone might see. Xavier noticed her fear immediately. "Stay," he said softly without looking away from the monitor. It was not an order. It sounded almost like protection. Then obstacle struck again. Lorraine suddenly grabbed Elijah's wheelchair. "If this video damages our family name, remember who will suffer most." Elijah's face tightened painfully. Emotional blackmail. Social pressure. Family pressure. The room became suffocating again. Naomi looked ready to collapse under the weight of it all. But Xavier stepped forward once more. Quiet authority. Unshaken. He lifted the microphone slowly while the first frozen frame appeared on the giant screen behind him. A hallway. A timestamp. Lorraine near the archive room. Her face almost visible. The crowd gasped sharply. Lorraine's confidence cracked completely now. Marcus opened the final page of the hidden records beside Xavier. Elijah stared at the screen in disbelief. The little boy squeezed Naomi's shaking hand. And then Xavier looked directly at the entire room and spoke the sentence that stopped every heartbeat inside the hall. Before you judge her, watch this. The frozen frame on the giant screen finally moved. Grainy hospital corridor footage filled the boardroom in complete silence. Naomi appeared first. Thin. Exhausted. Still wearing the faded white dress from the forced wedding ceremony. She stood outside the archive room holding medicine for her sick mother. Then another figure entered the screen. Lorraine. The room went cold instantly. Nobody whispered anymore. Nobody moved. On the footage, Lorraine looked around carefully before unlocking the restricted archive door herself. Marcus paused the video sharply. Timestamp verified, he said quietly. No edits. Lorraine immediately stepped forward. This proves nothing. Xavier finally looked at her directly. Calm eyes. Heavy silence. Then let us continue. The footage resumed. Everyone watched Lorraine remove a file from the cabinet. A birth record. The camera zoomed slightly when Marcus enhanced the frame. Naomi's full name appeared clearly across the screen beside another name underneath it. Elijah Ellington. Gasps exploded across the room. Naomi staggered backward. No, she whispered weakly. Elijah's face drained of color completely. The wealthy guest stared at him in disbelief. Xavier remained motionless, but his jaw tightened hard. Lorraine tried to laugh again, but her voice shook now. Fake records. Somebody planted this. Then the second piece of evidence appeared. Marcus carefully opened the damaged archive box and removed an old hospital envelope sealed 26 years earlier. Inside was a photograph. A young woman holding a newborn baby wrapped in a blanket with the exact silver necklace Naomi carried her entire life. Xavier slowly placed the photo beside Naomi's face. The resemblance crushed the room into silence again. Same eyes. Same birthmark near the collarbone. Same necklace. Same face. Naomi covered her mouth, trembling violently now. My mother, she whispered. A nurse stepped forward from the crowd suddenly. Older now. Nervous. Crying already. I remember that night, she confessed shakily. The baby was supposed to stay with the Ellington family. Lorraine spun toward her immediately. Be quiet. But the nurse continued through tears. The child disappeared before sunrise. We were told never to speak about it again. Emotional shock spread across every face in the hall. Phones lowered completely now. Even the richest guests looked uncomfortable. One man whispered quietly, Dear God. Elijah gripped his wheelchair arm tightly. Naomi, his voice cracked. You are my daughter. Naomi could not answer. Tears rolled silently down her face while years of humiliation collapsed around her all at once. Xavier stepped beside her protectively before the crowd could overwhelm her again. Quiet authority. Controlled fury. Nobody interrupts her again, he said coldly. Lorraine panicked now. Real panic. You are all being manipulated by a poor girl who wanted money. Marcus immediately slid another document across the table. Then explain this. Lorraine froze. It was her signed authorization form ordering Naomi's birth records sealed permanently 26 years earlier. The room exploded into whispers again. Naomi stared at the paper like her entire life had just shattered open. Xavier's voice remained terrifyingly calm. You hid her existence. Lorraine's lips trembled. I protected this family. By destroying hers. Xavier asked softly. That sentence silenced everyone again. The little boy near the doorway suddenly pointed toward Lorraine. She was the lady who yelled at the nurse. Another wave of shock hit the room. Lorraine looked trapped now. Cornered publicly for the first time in years. Then the final evidence arrived. Marcus opened the last folder carefully and removed a handwritten letter from Naomi's late mother. Xavier unfolded it slowly. His deep voice echoed across the silent hall as he read aloud. If anything happens to me, tell Elijah his daughter is alive. Elijah broke completely. Tears filled his eyes instantly. Naomi collapsed into sobs beside the table, unable to stand under the weight of the truth anymore. Nobody mocked her now. Nobody laughed. The same crowd that once called her a liar stared at her with guilt and shame. Lorraine backed away slowly. Pale. Sweating. Exposed. But the greatest shock had not even landed yet. Marcus quietly turned the final page of the hospital report toward Xavier. Xavier read it once. Then again. His expression darkened completely. He slowly lifted his eyes toward Lorraine while the entire room watched in terrified silence. You knew from the beginning, he said quietly. Naomi was never supposed to marry Elijah as punishment. His voice dropped lower. Deadlier. She was his daughter. The room stayed frozen after Xavier's final words. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Naomi stood in the middle of the hospital board hall like her entire life had cracked open beneath her feet. Elijah stared at her with trembling eyes. Lorraine looked trapped for the first time in years. That is a lie, she snapped suddenly. Her voice rose sharply now. Desperate. Those records were forged. Marcus calmly slid another file across the table. Signed by your personal attorney 26 years ago. Silence hit again. Xavier picked up the final hospital document slowly. The birth certificate was altered, he announced clearly. Naomi's identity was hidden under another family name. Gasps spread across the wealthy guests. One woman covered her mouth. Another lowered her phone in shame. The same people who laughed at Naomi hours earlier now could not even look at her. Lorraine tried again. I protected the Ellington family reputation. Elijah's voice cracked through the silence. You destroyed my daughter instead. Emotional shock rippled across the room. Naomi broke down quietly beside the table, tears falling without sound now. She remembered every insult. Every hungry night. Every humiliation. Every moment she begged for dignity while the truth sat hidden inside rich people's locked drawers. Xavier stepped beside her again. Calm. Protective. Naomi Ellington, he said carefully. You were never a burden. Hearing her real name spoken publicly shattered the room one more time. Naomi covered her face and cried openly now. Nobody mocked her anymore. Nobody whispered. Even the security guards lowered their eyes. Then the elderly nurse stepped forward once more holding the silver necklace carefully. Her mother begged us to protect this child, she said through tears. But Lorraine paid everyone to stay silent. Lorraine turned pale instantly. You have no proof of that. Marcus immediately pressed a button on the screen remote. A bank transfer document appeared behind them. Lorraine's private account. Hospital payments. Confidential silence agreements. Dates matching Naomi's disappearance. The crowd gasped loudly now. One guest whispered, she ruined that girl's entire life. Lorraine finally lost control. I did what was necessary, she shouted. That crippled boy could not inherit the family empire with scandal attached to his name. Elijah looked physically sick hearing those words. Naomi slowly turned toward him. Pain. Shock. Compassion somehow still inside her exhausted eyes. You did not know, she whispered softly. Elijah lowered his head in shame. Xavier's voice became colder now. Lorraine Ellington. He paused deliberately. Effective immediately, you are removed from all hospital board authority and family financial control pending legal review. The room erupted again. Public shame crashed down hard. Lorraine stared around desperately for support, but nobody stepped forward anymore. Even her closest allies avoided eye contact. You cannot do this to me, she whispered weakly. Xavier answered calmly. You already did it to yourself. Emotional silence swallowed the hall again. The little boy who protected the flash drive walked slowly toward Naomi and handed her the necklace carefully. It belongs to you, he said softly. Naomi held the necklace against her chest while crying harder now. The symbol that once brought pain finally became proof of truth. Elijah rolled his wheelchair closer to her slowly. I cannot erase what you suffered, he whispered. But I will spend the rest of my life trying to repair it. Naomi looked at him quietly. Hurt still remained. Confusion too. But for the first time in her life, somebody powerful finally believed her. The wealthy guests who once laughed now stood completely silent. Phones stopped recording. Heads lowered. The nurse cried openly. Marcus closed the hidden files carefully. Xavier then turned toward the board members. Restore Naomi's legal records immediately. Her mother's medical debts will be cleared today. Naomi looked up in shock. My mother, Xavier nodded once. She will receive proper treatment. Tiny relief finally entered Naomi's broken expression. Not revenge. Not hatred. Just dignity returning slowly after years of humiliation. Lorraine collapsed weakly into a chair while the entire room watched her without sympathy now. Her power was gone. Her lies were dead. But Naomi's story was only beginning. Xavier slowly picked up the official identity documents and placed them carefully into Naomi's shaking hands. Then he looked toward the mansion doors waiting beyond the hall. Warm light spilled softly through the entrance. Quiet. Safe. Almost unreal after everything she survived. Xavier's deep voice softened for the first time that night. Come home, Naomi. Naomi stood motionless at the mansion entrance while Xavier's words echoed softly through the night. Come home, Naomi. The giant iron gates slowly opened behind him. Warm golden light spilled across the marble floor. For the first time in years, nobody looked at her with disgust. Nobody laughed at her torn shoes or trembling hands. Naomi held the official identity papers tightly against her chest while tears rolled silently down her face. The silver necklace rested in her palm beside the documents now. No longer a symbol of shame. A symbol of truth. Elijah slowly wheeled himself closer to her. His eyes were red from crying. I cannot ask you to forgive me tonight, he whispered carefully. But this family owes you the life we stole. Naomi looked at him quietly. So much pain still lived inside her. But anger no longer controlled the room. The truth had finally spoken louder than power. Xavier gently guided her forward through the mansion doors. Not as punishment anymore. Not as humiliation. But as family. The massive hall looked different now. Softer somehow. The same servants who once ignored her lowered their heads respectfully as she passed. One elderly housekeeper quietly wiped tears from her eyes. Welcome home, Miss Naomi. Naomi almost broke down hearing those words. Upstairs, doctors were already treating her mother in one of the private medical suites Xavier arranged immediately after the public reveal. Naomi rushed into the room the moment she saw her. Her mother looked weak but peaceful for the first time in years. Medical machines hummed softly nearby. Clean sheets. Warm light. Safety. Naomi fell beside the bed crying openly. Mama, her mother touched her face gently. You survived, she whispered weakly. Naomi nodded through tears. Because you protected me. Emotional silence filled the room. Xavier stood quietly near the doorway, giving them space. Elijah remained behind him, unable to stop staring at the daughter he lost for decades without knowing. Then Naomi's mother slowly reached toward the silver necklace around Naomi's neck. Your father gave this to me before everything was destroyed, she whispered softly. Elijah lowered his head in pain again. I failed both of you. Naomi looked at him for a long moment before answering quietly, you were lied to too. That small sentence changed something inside the room. Healing did not arrive loudly. It arrived softly. Carefully. Like wounded people learning how to breathe again. Days later, the mansion atmosphere transformed completely. Lorraine's portraits disappeared from the walls. Her board authority was removed publicly. The legal investigation continued quietly in the background, but nobody spoke her name much anymore. Her power ended the moment truth entered the light. Naomi, meanwhile, slowly began rebuilding her life. Her official records were restored. Her education fund was reopened under the Ellington Family Trust. The hospital offered her a respectful position helping community patients after hearing her story. For the first time, she walked through wealthy halls without lowering her eyes. One afternoon, Naomi stood alone in the mansion library staring at the old family photograph Marcus restored from the archives. Her mother smiling. Elijah younger. A missing space where she should have been all along. Xavier entered quietly behind her. You do not have to carry everything alone anymore, he said softly. Naomi smiled through tears for the first time. Small. Real. Peaceful. I still do not understand why you helped me, she admitted. Xavier looked toward the silver necklace resting against her collarbone. Because some truths deserve protection. Emotional warmth finally replaced fear inside her chest. Outside, the little boy who saved the flash drive laughed while running through the garden with the staff children. Life moved again. Not perfect. But safe. One evening, Naomi placed the silver necklace carefully inside a glass case beside the restored family photo in the mansion hall. The object that once carried pain now stood openly as proof that lies never survive forever. As she stepped back, Elijah slowly approached beside her. You belong here, he said quietly. Naomi looked around the peaceful mansion one last time. The same place where she once entered as a forced bride for humiliation. Now she stood there with dignity restored. Family restored. Name restored. The final image settled softly across the quiet mansion hall. Naomi walking forward beside the people who finally saw her worth. No fear. No shame. Only peace. Because the world may laugh at the poor. Power may bury the truth for years. But kindness leaves traces. Truth waits patiently. And one day, no matter how deeply it is hidden, it always finds the light.